Chapter 3. Cole stared sullenly into the fire, then let his gaze wander. He had wanted revenge, but felt little joy from this act. Overhead, eagles drifted on the air currents. In the bay, a mother seal played with her spotted pups as a golden sun peeked through the gray overcast and glinted off the waves. "This place sucks," Cole mumbled as the breeze drifted sparks upward like wandering stars. He stared back into the crackling red-hot flames, and his anger burned. Cole rocked back and forth on his feet. Nobody cared about him. Nobody understood him. Nobody knew what it was like living with parents who wished he wasn't alive. It angered Cole when people pretended they did. His parole officer was one of those people. Once Garvey had shown up at the detention center on his day off, wearing cutoffs and a t-shirt. He carried a brown paper grocery bag. Without saying hello, he set the bag on the small concrete table in Cole's cell and sat himself down on the edge of the bed. "So," he said, "tell me exactly what it is you don't like about your life." "Any moron can figure that out," Cole grumbled, turning his back on Garvey. In the summer's stifling heat, the room seemed airless and threatening. "Okay, explain it to this moron," Garvey said. "I'm pretty dense, you know. Your police file makes for pretty dull reading." Not wanting to sit anywhere near Garvey, Cole slouched to the floor against the wall. "You don't get it, do you? My parents are divorced and don't give a rat if I live or die. All they care about is themselves. Nobody cares about me. All my life I've been dumped on." "A lot of people can say that," Garvey said. "Be more specific." "Be more specific," Cole mimicked. "Last year I went out for wrestling. I had to beg my parents to come watch me. It was like they were ashamed of me." "Did they ever come to see you?" "Yeah, after I got mad enough, and then I lost. You'd have thought I lost on purpose the way Dad acted." When Garvey didn't answer, Cole said, "So, have you heard enough?" "I'm still listening." Cole didn't know why he was spilling his guts to Garvey, but he fought back tears as he continued. "All my parents do is drink. They hate me. Do you know what it's like waking up every morning knowing you're not good enough? There are only two things wrong with me: everything I do and everything I say. They'll never be happy until I'm dead." After an awkward silence, Garvey eyed Cole. He spoke quietly. "There's still one thing more, isn't there?" Cole hesitated. "It's none of your business." "I know how you're feeling," Garvey said. Cole leaped to his feet and glared at Garvey. "You don't know how I'm feeling," he shouted. "You don't know what it's like being hit over and over until you're so numb you don't feel anything." Garvey nodded slowly. "I do know what that's like. Is it your dad who hits you?" Cole turned to face the wall. "He drinks until he turns into a monster. Mom just gets drunk and pretends nothing has happened. It's like a bad dream I can't wake up from." Garvey stood up and reached into the brown paper bag he had brought with him. One by one, he pulled out groceries and set them on the small cement table. "What are you doing?" Cole asked. Garvey ignored the question as he laid out salt, flour, eggs, baking soda, a bottle of water, sugar, butter, and molasses. Cole wiped sweat from his forehead. The stuffy room felt like a furnace. "Okay," said Garvey, finishing. "Taste everything on the table." "No way," Cole grumbled. "I'm not eating that crap." "You surprise me," Garvey said. "You're actually afraid of a little bad taste." "I'm not afraid of anything," Cole boasted, standing and approaching the table. One by one he sampled each item, tasting first the flour, sugar, and baking soda. He purposely took big mouthfuls to prove nothing bothered him. Casually he drank some thick molasses. He stared straight at Garvey as he bit off a chunk of butter and swallowed it. When he came to the eggs, he picked one up, tilted his head back, and broke it raw into his mouth. He downed it with a single swallow. He finished by shaking salt directly into his mouth. "So," Garvey asked, "how did everything taste?" "Gross." Cole took a long swig of water from the bottle. "What did you expect?" Garvey reached back into the bag. "I want you to taste one more thing." He unwrapped a small baked cake with creamy frosting and broke off a large piece. "Here," he said, Eat this if you dare. Cole wolfed down the moist piece of cake, eyeing Garvey the whole time. So what does all this prove? Garvey shrugged. Did you like the cake? It was okay. I baked it this morning using the same ingredients you tasted on the table. Yeah, so? Cole said. What ingredients should I have left out? None, Cole said. That's a dumb question. But you said the ingredients tasted gross. Cole let his irritation show. Not mixed together, stupid. Garvey stood and walked wearily to the door. His shoulders sagged forward as if tired from a long hike. Leaving the cake and all the ingredients on the table, he let himself out the steel door without saying goodbye. Cole walked sullenly around the room. Cursing, he swept his arms across the table and set the baking ingredients flying. Eggs smashed, wrappings broken open, plastic containers ricocheted off the walls. In seconds, the small room looked bombed. Cole kicked at the butter, flour, sugar, and baking soda. Sticky molasses and egg whites coated his shoes as he picked up the cake and flung it hard at the steel door. "The cake sucks," he shouted, "and so does my life." Inch by inch, the billowing flames devoured the supplies in the shelter. Cole chuckled, then laughed out loud. As the searing flames surged and rolled higher along the sides of the shelter, his laughter grew hysterical. By the time the flames engulfed the wooden hut and licked up into open air, Cole had lost all control. His wild laughter mocked the world and everyone he had ever known. It mocked the loneliness. It mocked every bully that had ever picked on him. He laughed every time he had ever been teased, every time he'd been arrested, every time his parents had argued. He laughed at all the times he'd been beaten by his drunken father, or been ignored by his drunken mother. These were the ingredients in his cake, and they sucked. Cole didn't care anymore. His life was beyond caring. With Cole's laughter, hot tears escaped his reddened and angry eyes and flooded his cheeks. This banishment was the ultimate hurt. Worse than his father's fists and belt, worse than his mother's never caring. This was the hurt of being alone and unwanted. The flames of the burning shelter rumbled like a freight train and sucked all the air. Thick smoke poured from the doorway and boiled upward from the blaze. Still Cole kept laughing like a madman. Not until the flames began to subside did his manic laughter fade. Only then did he let his attention stray from the fire. The first thing he saw was the atao, the brightly colored blanket given to him by Garvey. It rested unharmed in the grass nearby. Shielding his face from the burning heat, Cole snatched up the atao and with one swift motion flung it towards the fire. In the same motion, he turned away from the flames and ran towards the shoreline. No one in the healing circle had known how strongly he could swim, not even Garvey. The only person who knew was his father. He was the one who had forced Cole to go out for the swim team because that is what he himself had done in high school. But no matter how well Cole swam, his father criticized him. "You swim like you have lead up your butt," he'd scream as Cole swam, if he managed to show up at all. Cole studied the bay as he removed his shoes and pulled off his clothes. He stood in his underwear and stared out across the waters. The boat had brought him west from Drake. Now, with the afternoon sun setting behind him, he fixed his eyes on the first island to the east. He could swim island to island, stopping at each to warm up, eat, and sleep. Sooner or later, there would be a passing boat to take him back to the mainland. Nobody would ever find him, and no one would ever again tell him what to do. Cole waded into the light surf. His breath caught when the waves reached his chest. The icy, transparent water was cold. Colder than he had expected, but he plunged forward and began stroking. He knew he could not survive forever in the frigid water. Every minute counted now, and he needed to swim hard. Rhythmically, he reached out, each stroke taking him farther away from his island prison. As Cole swam, he thought about Garvey and the stupid cake demonstration, and he thought about his application for Circle Justice. It had been a full 3 weeks after he'd submitted the application before Garvey had casually said, "Well, champ, you've been accepted for Circle Justice. Now, what are you going to do with this chance? It's about time. I hope the committee knows what they're getting into. Garvey said. This was your idea, Cole shot back. Garvey nodded. So, are you going to disappoint them? Don't worry about me, Cole said. How soon can I get out of this stink hole? First, the keepers will prepare the hearing circle, where everybody gets together to look for solutions. Who exactly will be there? Anybody who wants to help. Who would want to help me? Might be your parents, the lawyers, the judge, myself, community members, maybe even your classmates at school. Anybody can be a part of the circle if they want to help find a solution. My parents? That's a joke, Cole scoffed. They don't care if I'm dead or alive. When Garvey didn't answer, Cole asked, Will Peter be there? Garvey shrugged. It's up to him. He may not be ready to forgive you. I don't care if he forgives me. Garvey rubbed the back of his neck, then glanced up towards the ceiling. How come everything is always about you? This forgiveness isn't for you. Until Peter forgives you, he won't heal. Maybe if he forgives me, everyone will forget about what I did and I can get out of this pit faster. Garvey stood to leave. Forgiving isn't forgetting, chump. Chapter 4. By the time Cole paused to catch his breath, he found himself outside the bay, angling towards the next island, maybe a mile away. The icy water numbed him deeper with each breath. He gulped at the air. He had to make it before he froze to death. His arms ached, but he continued stroking even as his mind wandered. Following Cole's acceptance for circle justice, preparation meetings called Circles of Understanding took place. Each meeting was considered a healing circle, but had a different name, depending on what was being discussed and who attended. There were talking circles, peacemaking circles, and community circles. Eventually, there would be bail circles and sentencing circles. Is everything always in a circle? Cole had asked Garvey. Why not? Garvey said. Life is a circle. Do I have to go to all these meetings? Garvey shook his head. The organizers of the circle are called keepers. When the keepers meet with people like Peter and his family, you're not allowed. Why do they meet with them? If the Driscolls realize that the circle allows them to have a voice in decisions, and that forgiveness can help Peter to heal, they may also join the circle. You mean they might help decide my sentence? Garvey nodded. Maybe. They'll hang me, Cole said. I'm dead. I think you've already hung yourself, Garvey answered. Once preparations were ready for the first hearing circles, notices were sent out and meetings were held in the basement of the public library. Cole scratched nervously at his stomach as he entered the library the first night. He didn't know what to expect as the guard removed his handcuffs outside the meeting room and let him walk in alone. The guard remained in the hallway. The woman who called herself the keeper met Cole and shook his hand. Thanks for coming tonight, she said pleasantly. She wore blue jeans and a flannel shirt, even though she was old enough to be Cole's grandmother. I didn't have much choice, Cole mumbled as he seated himself. He picked at the edge of his chair as he watched complete strangers file in and choose seats. The number of chairs made it obvious the healing circle involved a lot more people than the other meetings. To make matters worse, Cole knew that tonight he might see Peter for the first time since the beating. Each new arrival greeted him and all the others warmly. Everybody acted as if they were friends. Cole played their games and nodded politely, but he noticed that nobody sat beside him. Several kept eyeing him curiously. He recognized one man as Judge Tanner. The last time Cole had seen him, the judge had been wearing a black robe at the arraignment hearing in juvenile court when Cole first pleaded guilty. Tonight, Judge Tanner wore no robe and was dressed in blue jeans and a sweater. Cole's father and their lawyer, Nathaniel Blackwood, entered together wearing dark three-piece suits and ties. They looked completely out of place. The lawyer looked as if he'd been dipped in plastic. The two nodded to Cole and seated themselves on his immediate left. Cole ignored them. Cole's mother arrived alone and seated herself on his right. She wore a party dress. Not a single hair on her head was out of place. That's all this was, Cole thought bitterly. This was just another social event. She had probably spent a couple of hours getting ready. Nothing, however, could cover up the frightened look in her eyes. Cole guessed she had probably downed a few drinks before coming, something to calm her nerves. Cole squirmed in his seat. His parents hadn't even acknowledged each other. When Garvey arrived, he sat nearby, shifting nervously in his chair. Cole nodded to Garvey as he watched more strangers enter and be seated. It seemed like the whole world was showing up. And why not? The keepers had posted a notice on the library bulletin board with an open invitation to anybody who wanted to participate. Cole tapped his shoes against the leg of the chair. Why hadn't they just gone into the street and hollered, "Hey everybody, come help make fun of Cole Matthews"? At least none of his classmates had shown up, Cole thought. They probably knew what he'd do to them if they did. Then Cole heard more people come in and turned to see Peter walk in with his parents and their lawyer. Peter walked awkwardly, shuffling his feet and glancing timidly around the room. His lawyer looked the same age as Cole's mom, but walked with her head up and shoulders squared. Almost immediately she picked Cole out of the circle and eyed him. He glanced down. Nearly 24 people had joined the circle by the time the keeper stood to begin. She smiled pleasantly. "Everybody please stand and hold hands," she said. Cole didn't like holding hands with his parents, one on each side. His hands were clammy, and he found himself comparing his mother's frightened, weak squeeze to his father's iron-hard grip. As the keeper bowed her head, Cole peeked and caught Peter peeking back. He narrowed his eyes, threatening, and Peter looked away. Cole grinned until he realized Peter's lawyer was watching him. "Great Maker and Healer, hear this prayer," began the keeper in a soft voice. "Tonight we gather because of our community has been hurt. Grant wisdom and patience as we search for wellness. Amen." As the circle sat down, the keeper drew in a deep, slow breath, looking around to acknowledge each person. Still smiling, she said, "Well, I see many new faces here tonight." She glanced directly at the two lawyers and Judge Tanner. Let me remind everybody, we are not here to win or lose. Justice often fails because it seeks to punish, not to heal. Jails and fines harden people." Cole found himself nodding. The keeper paused. "We call this circle justice, but we really seek wellness. We try to meet the needs of both the offender and the victim." The keeper looked directly at Cole and his family, then at Peter and his family. Circle justice is for those ready for healing. It's not an easy way out. In fact, a healing path is often much harder. The keeper held up a feather. This feather symbolizes respect and responsibility. No one must speak without this feather. When you hold this feather in your hand, speak honestly from your heart. She chuckled. "I hope I'm not being long-winded, because talking too long tells others that you don't respect their right to speak. Respect others as much as yourself. When the feather comes to you, speak only if you wish to. The circle carries only two obligations: honesty and respect." The keeper fixed her gaze on Cole. "Cole Matthews, you have a long history of anger, growing more violent until you severely injured Peter Driscoll. Even now, Peter continues therapy for injuries." Cole squirmed in his chair. He didn't like being talked to with a bunch of people staring at him. The keeper raised her voice slightly and turned to the group. "Our challenge is to return wellness, not only to Peter Driscoll, but also to Cole Matthews, and to our community. We'll pass the feather several times tonight, introducing ourselves, expressing concerns, and offering ideas for healing and repairing the harm." The keeper handed the feather to the first person seated on her left side. "I am Gladys Swanson, and I'm the mother of 4 children here in Minneapolis," the lady began. "I want to help make our community better because this is the community where I'm raising my own children." "I'm Frank Schaefer," the next person said. "This is the first real opportunity I've had to help change the violence in our city." One by one, the people around the circle held the feather and spoke. Cole's mother fingered the feather nervously during her turn. "I'm Cindy Matthews, Cole's mom," she said. "I'm here because I don't know what to do anymore. It's gotten so hard." She paused, her bottom lip trembling, then handed the feather to Cole. The room grew extra quiet, and Cole's face warmed. Squeaking chairs and shuffling shoes broke the anxious silence. Cole coughed to clear his throat. A lot depended on his next words. I'm Cole Matthews, and I'm here because I really screwed up, he said. I know what I did was wrong, and I want Peter to know I'm sorry for everything. Cole sniffled purposely, rubbing at his nose for effect. I want to ask this circle to help me get over my anger. Cole handed the feather to his father as he glanced around the group. He liked the reactions he saw. People heard what they wanted to hear. Tonight, the group wanted to believe he was sorry. He could see it in their eyes. Cole's father sat up taller in his chair. I'm William Matthews, he announced importantly. I'm here to make sure that my son never causes problems again. He turned and glared at Cole. This is all going to end now. Cole ignored his father. Next, Nathaniel Blackwood received the feather. He held it loosely in his fingers as if it were a cigarette and cleared his throat loudly. Yes, what Cole did was wrong, but kids will be kids. Considering Cole's detention to date, we feel he should be released to parole into the supervision of one of his parents. He needs a family, not a jail cell. The lawyer handed the feather on. As the feather moved from person to person, Cole kept glancing at Peter. The thin, red-haired boy stared at the floor. When he was handed the feather, Peter looked up fearfully and mumbled, I'm Peter Driscoll, and I'm here because I got beat up. His speech was slow and halting. His eyes darted around the circle as he passed the feather quickly to his mother. Cole studied Peter. Peter hadn't sounded like this before. Cole wiped his sweaty hands on his pants. It wasn't like he had meant to hurt anyone. Besides, this wouldn't have happened if Peter had kept his mouth shut. Chapter 5. Once clear of the bay, Cole swam even harder. Misty rain roughed the waters as waves washed over his head. When he stopped to rest, his breath came in ragged gasps. His numb limbs felt wooden and stiff, moving awkwardly as if disconnected from his body. Cole turned to look back. At first his mind rejected what he saw. He was still at the mouth of the bay. He shook his head to clear the illusion, but it was no illusion. This was the same spot he had been at 1,000 strokes earlier. But how could it be? The wind and waves hadn't been that strong, yet even as he struggled to tread water with his numb limbs, he found himself drifting back towards the shoreline. In that instant, Cole realized his mistake. His anger had so clouded his thinking, he hadn't considered the incoming tide. With every stroke forward, a giant invisible hand had pushed him 2 strokes backward into the bay, returning him towards the shore. A sharp cramp gripped Cole's leg, then his other leg started cramping. He gasped for breath and panicked. He had to make it back to land. Any land. Frantically, he flailed at the water. Struggling did little to affect Cole's movement, but on the incoming tide he had steadily drifted closer to shore. He fought only to keep his head above water. When the rocky bottom bumped against his feet, he kept thrashing his lifeless limbs. Again and again his feet struck the rock bottom, and pain shot up his legs. Finally, he quit fighting and let the waves push his body into shallow water. A wave broke over his head, and he came up gagging and spitting salt water. He tried to lift himself, but his arms collapsed. Finally, using only his elbows, he squirmed and crawled his way over the slippery rocks and up onto the grassy ground above the tide line. There he lay spent and shivering, his body bruised, his cold skull throbbing in rhythm with his heartbeat. Cole had lost all track of time and struggled to think. All he could conjure up were fleeting notions. He couldn't stand up. He needed warmth. It was almost dark. He felt pain. One thought repeated. He needed warmth. He knew there was no warmth, and yet he remembered flames. Where were the flames? He had to find them. Cole tried to stand up, but his legs collapsed under him. Imagining a fire, he dragged his way forward again on his belly. His legs pulled behind him like worthless anchors. It was hard in the gathering darkness to make out shapes. The waves, the shoreline, the trees, the bay, all existed like parts of a puzzle. Cole rested again under the throbbing in his head and disappeared. His head felt hollow, his mind empty. One detached thought kept coming back to him. There had been flames, but where? Night had come quickly, and Cole scanned the dark shadows around him, sensing a vague familiarity. Again, he tried to stand, but couldn't. He dragged himself forward one last time, then collapsed. Slowly, the cold disappeared. Lying belly down in the darkness, Cole felt his legs and chest sting as if they were on fire. Then he became aware of another feeling, stronger than any burning in his arms and belly. More haunting than the darkness that surrounded him was the realization that he was alone, totally alone with himself, and it scared him. Sometime during the night, Cole drifted into a fitful sleep. When he awoke, darkness still hid the island. His first conscious sense was pain. His toes, hands, elbows, chest, legs all ached. What had happened? Vaguely he remembered burning the supplies in the shelter and then trying to escape by swimming. After that he remembered the tide and crawling up the rocky shore. There had been terrible cold, then more crawling. Then he recalled his skin burning. After that, loneliness. Cole breathed in the cold, damp night air. Where was he now? The air smelled of salt, seaweed, and something burnt. Then he slept again. When he awoke the next time, dawn had crept into the sky. Lifting one arm, he found it covered with black ash. He was lying nearly naked, squarely in the ashes of the burned shelter. He gathered his strength and struggled to his feet. The world seemed to tilt and spin. In the dawn light, billowing clouds mounded against the far horizon like a snowdrift. The warm ash stuck to the raw scrapes on Cole's chest and legs. Blood crusted his elbows and knees, and his dry mouth kept from swallowing. Every joint in his body ached. As he wavered on his weakened legs, Cole became aware of a presence. Not movement, only a lurking presence. Grimacing, he searched the trees and shore. At first, nothing different or out of place. Then, something large and white broke the smooth pattern of the shoreline. He squinted, and the image cleared. A bear. A white bear. Out across the water on the point of shoreline near the opening of the bay, a massive white bear stood as motionless as a statue facing him. Morning light glinted off its shiny white fur and made it glow. The bear stood patiently, proud, nose forward, ears alert. Cole kept blinking his eyes. Could this possibly be one of the spirit bears Edwin had spoken of? He had said they lived hundreds of miles to the south on a different island, and yet what else could it be? Shivering in only his underwear, Cole crouched and picked up a rock. This spirit bear didn't have any right to stare at him. It didn't have pride, dignity, and honor like Edwin had said. It was just a mangly bear. Cole flung the rock, even though the bear was nearly a quarter mile away. "Keep snaring and I'll kill you," he shouted. What really angered Cole about the bear was that it stood there frozen on the shoreline without any sign of fear. It defied him. He looked around for some kind of weapon. In the ashes he spotted the charred blade of a hunting knife from one of the boxes. He picked it up and turned back toward the spirit bear. It had disappeared. Cole searched the trees, but the bear was gone. Puzzled, he tossed the knife back on the ground. "I ever see you again, you're dead," he vowed. "I'll teach you to be afraid of me." As he turned back towards the ashes, another bright object caught his attention. Not 10 feet away lay the colorful red and blue blanket Garvey had given him. What had he called it? Atow? It rested near some tall grass, completely untouched by the flames. Cole picked it up and examined it with his sore fingers. Had he missed when he threw the atow into the flames? Shrugging, he wrapped the blanket around his shoulders. He hobbled on his bruised feet down to where he had left his shoes and clothes. Cole felt no regret for having burned the supplies in the shelter, nor did he regret hurting Peter. This was all somebody else's fault. If it weren't for his parents, Peter, and the stupid healing circle, he wouldn't even be here. Nobody would pay for what happened. Or somebody would pay for what happened. He would get revenge, especially against those who had wanted him in jail. People like Peter's lady lawyer. He hated her. Cole remembered the first time he had seen her hold the feather in the circle. She waved it like a wand and pointed it directly at him. "That boy is dangerous. she said. Next time he might kill someone. This circle justice has its place, but I oppose any plan that does not isolate Cole Matthews. Cole didn't like someone accusing him. He hated sitting in a room across from the slimeball creep he had used as a punching bag. And he hated being around his parents and the high-priced lawyer they had hired for him. The room felt stuffy, and he dug at the woven blanket on his chair with his fingernails. Circle justice stunk. Each word spoken in the circle was like kindling added to his smoldering anger. Cole must go to jail and get anger counseling, somebody said. He's proved he can't be trusted. Cole is a risk to our children and to our community, another person in the circle said. We can't risk his release. It was the next voice that made Cole explode. His father held the feather, toying with it in his finger. We've always wanted the best for Cole, he said. His mother and I have devoted our lives to him, but that's bull, Cole shouted suddenly, although he wasn't holding the feather. You drink until you can't stand up and you're gone all the time. A devoted parent doesn't whip his kid until a shirt can't hide all the bruises.